There were some other issues too. I don't think the managers were made aware of what they were going to wind up having to maintain, so that was a problem. But since that time, through this program, they've gone to 10-to-1 slopes on those breaches. Is that correct,
Yes.
Karen? And so now it's a very gradual drive down into the breach. They're very wide, very long, and much easier for the Tax Ditch Association to maintain. So they're not backing up water. They are just simply using the floodplain on private property. These landowners own this land and have participated in this program, this wetland, I think it's WRP program,
Correct.
through the federal government.
Little history here, back when they were doing this ditch back in the early 80s, the Tax Ditch Association went in and just took care of the problem themselves and almost had to go to federal court because they cut down a bunch of trees in there that they weren't supposedly allowed to do. It never happened, but they took care of the problem, so, anyway.
So are these floodplains on private property considered non-tidal wetlands?
To be honest with you, Mr. Dodd, I'm assuming that's the case. It's part of the original floodplain, and then when they dug the ditch, a lot of times the spoil just went next to the ditch. It didn't go anywhere, so it limited it. I mean, the water had to come up very high to get over in the floodplain. This alleviates that and makes this floodplain more accessible. So it may have been that this was originally non-tidal wetland.
So if we see flooded land in our travels during the rains, it may be a floodplain that's
may.
designed for this purpose?
Yeah,
Okay.
it may. A lot of this is on the lower end of Horse Bridge, down near the outlet, if I'm not mistaken.
Going back to Beaver Dam, how far does Beaver Dam tax ditch run? Does it run all the way to Route 50? Or does it run to just Walston Switch Road?
Without looking at my map, I'm not sure.
I believe it's just about past where the old railroad bridge crosses over, between Walston and Winter Place.
So it runs
I think the maintenance itself stops at the Winter Place.
Yeah,
at the Winter Place property, which would be the railroad bridge.
yeah, right about shortly thereafter, because the railroad bridge and then the power lines.
Okay, all right.
Did you have any, we interrupted you after paragraph 1.
I think we've kind of covered this. Maybe what we need to do is leave it to you all to just review, and if you have additional questions about it, I think that maybe this isn't the way to address this. Maybe it is, but review this, and we'd be glad to come back again and
Okay.
discuss it further.
It's been very informative. We really appreciate you being here.
Sure.
It's been very productive.
And we appreciate the cooperation of the council, especially with this project in Wicomico and the review of the tax rolls.
If you have meetings with some of the tax ditch associations, could you inform the council, so if we wanted to be there?
Yeah, in fact, I do give Gail in the treasurer's office the dates of the
yeah,
annual
Could you
meetings.
inform our county
Absolutely.
council person? That would be better.
Yes, and we also have an annual breakfast,
Uh-huh.
November the 15th, where it's just for all the managers to come. We have a guest speaker, obviously food. So, and I can send that out as well.
Oh, yeah, we'd love, if you can send it to Mrs. Hurley, that'd be great. Yeah, the more communication, the better.
Yeah.
Any other questions for anyone? Again, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having
Thanks
us.
for coming in.
Very helpful.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Dallas. What are we gonna do, gentlemen?
No.
I don't know, we have people waiting to hear the Pirates Wharf stuff. Could we do that?
I'd like to be dead. Who wants to take a vote? We have 2 people that want to break for lunch. Anybody else?
I say we press on after Pirates Wharf.
Just
have
knock
lunch.
the Pirates Wharf out real quick.
I think you're outnumbered. Next item on the agenda, trust me, Jeff. Next item on the agenda is the discussing with the development of Pirates Wharf.
Mr. President,
Yes.
do you want to take like a 2-minute recess, just so we can change the tape, TAC 14 tape?
You'll never get Mr. Holloway back. We're going to take a, all right, yes, thank you.
Oh,
We're going to take a 2-minute recess.
looks like she already had lunch.
You didn't want me here if I had. However many questions Since you guys have it.
Okay, we reconvene as the Wicomico County Council for October 16th, 2018 legislative session. Next item on the open work session is the federal, state, and local funding for the development of Pirates Wharf.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miller.
Thank you. Steve Miller, I'm the Director of Recreation, Parks, and Tourism for the county.
Pam Olin, Deputy Director.
So, Mr. President and council members, thank you for having us today. So, we're here to talk about the future development of Pirates Wharf into a park. And in particular, today we wanted to talk about grant funding that the county was recently awarded. So I'd like to just touch briefly, very briefly, on three basic topics. One, I just want to mention the grant and tell you a little bit about the
Shouldn't
grant.
that be said matching grant?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we'll get to that. So first, I'd like to tell you about the grant that we had received. I'd like to, secondly, tell you why we received it, according to the state representatives that we worked with. And then thirdly, as you mentioned, talk about the matching requirements and our plan to match the grant award. So the grant award that we received is a federal grant through the Land Water Conservation Fund that's administered. It's funded through the National Park Service and administered through the states. So it's a competitive process that would route through the states. So several counties across the state applied. Wicomico County was one of two that received a grant. And we received by far the largest grant award. So the state, both the state and the federal folks felt like this was a very worthwhile project that hit some of their key targets. So we received a grant award letter in the amount of $820,000. It is a 50-50 match grant, which I'll reference here in a moment. But in the way it functions, it's very similar to program Open Space in terms of its restrictions if we were to receive this grant. It's perpetual use for recreation parks, usage, public access, those types of things, very similar to POS. One of the unique restrictions that is not POS is that they prohibit any kind of ag leases. So currently we have a farm lease at the property that expires at the end of December. We've notified the farmer that upon acceptance of this grant, that would expire and we would no longer have a lease there as far as farm lease. So there's other restrictions, but essentially it's very similar to POS. So that in a nutshell is the grant for $820,000. In terms of why we received the grant, the feedback that we had received from the state, again, this routed through the state as far as the grant application process. Last year, the county executive had appointed a work group of 12, which was a pretty wide range of folks, and that's in your packet of materials as to who participated. But over a 6-month process, we did site visits and several meetings and surveys and various things to give recommendation to the executive as to how to potentially develop this property. So the work group, after its work was completed, essentially provided three main objectives, three overall objectives for the property. Number one was to provide public water access on the Wicomico. Number two was to provide low-impact recreational opportunities, which might include things like hiking or bird watching, very low-impact type activities. And thirdly, a main objective was to keep the features of the park as natural as possible. And that's, you heard some of those concerns today, but the work group felt strongly that the park should not be overdeveloped, that it should remain as natural as possible and give public access. So those were the main components of our federal grant application. And the state, like I said, we got the largest grant award of any county in the state. It fits with the objectives of the state, which is water access, trails, public access. So they were obviously very much in line with state goals and national goals as far as those types of activities. So that is the feedback we received as to why we got grant consideration and ultimately got the award. Now, in terms of matching funds, this is in your packet, but this is a 50-50 match grant. So $820,000 we have to match, and we can match that with both state and local funding. So our plan, as we've submitted to you, is primarily state funding, but also local funding. So in terms of the state funding, we have already submitted applications through both Program Open Space and the Waterway Improvement Fund. Those applications have been submitted. We have not heard back on those, but particularly with Program Open Space, we don't anticipate any issues there. Like I said, we had to work through DNR to get this national or this federal grant to move forward. So program open space lines up with those initiatives, so we don't anticipate issues there.
Didn't you tell us at one time that we were having difficulty receiving funding from public open space the past few years?
Yeah, it got the governor fully restored it this past year, so our number went up.
So it's fully restored?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, for a while it had shrunk over the years, but it's been restored, thankfully, which makes a big difference. But, so, we've applied for $315,000 through program open space, which we have in our unencumbered balance with the state through that program. We've also applied for $200,000 of waterway improvement funding, which is also a state grant program. The remainder would be county funding, and this is funding that is already in hand, that we're not asking for any new money. The council had approved in last year's CIP $100,000 to pursue a master plan, so that would be included as part of this project. So that's money we've already got. And then the additional is we're requesting a transfer of funds of $254,000 from Rec and Parks Reserve, which is, since the inception of, or since Munis, we went back through FY08, I believe it was, all the lease payments at Pirates Wharf. So that included the house lease, the farming lease, and the hunting lease, which per POS, those monies have to be set aside for the project. So what we're requesting is that those funds would be transferred to help us fulfill the match requirements. If approved, when it's all said and done, we would have a little over $1.6 million to develop the property, which would include a master plan. And we would not be asking the county for any additional funds, just the transfer of funds that are in the Rec and Parks Reserve. So that's essentially an overview. Pam can get into the nitty-gritty on the matching funds, or I'd be happy to answer any questions on the project itself or timelines or anything you want to talk about.
Well, if we don't get the state grants, then the county will have to come up with matching funds, is that correct?
Yeah, I like I said, I don't anticipate at all program open space. We have that money in program open space. We have to go through a process. If the waterway funding did not come through, because that would be dependent on us having the ability to put in a boat ramp, and we won't know until we go through the master planning process and permitting and working with the Army Corps whether or not that can be done safely. And if it's not a possibility, then we would increase our program open space next year, which would defer other projects. We would have that money available, but it would defer other projects.
But essentially, if we accept this 800,000, we're essentially committed to spending in some form or another, another 800,000
Correct.
on this. So,
Yes.
Okay.
We have to budget.
And how would that, so we accept the grant, let's say, and then they turn over the $800,000 to us?
It's
and
a
the-
reimbursement grant, like all of
Okay.
our other grants are.
So then, when we do work, we submit it, and then we get reimbursed based on that. And if they don't approve of what, let's say it was something that they say, no, you can't do this with this money, then it doesn't get reimbursed.
Correct, but what our intention would be to show them what our master plan is and how it meets the goals of that grant.
Okay.
And thus, we would not undertake, our intentions is not to undertake
Yeah.
anything that
wouldn't be reimbursable.
that wouldn't be
Yeah, that's
reimbursable.
fair. Okay.
So they're giving it, they're grants for 800,000, but if we could only come up with 600,000 in matching, that's all we would get from the federal. Is that right? Or do we have to come up with an 800,000 match?
We would need to commit to come up with the $820,000 match. But like I said, we get an annual allocation from the state through program open space. So it's not ideal because there's other projects that we would like to use open space, but if we had to, that would be the route we would go.
Is there a time limit on this?
It's 4 years.
4 years.
For the federal grant, we have a 4-year obligation to complete the project.
I was telling somebody this morning, I'm glad to see this moving ahead. I'm going to have to find something else to complain about, I guess. That property's been sitting there a long, long time without anything being done to it. And, I guess I've kind of used it as a little bit when some other project come along, I'd always say, well, what about the Hershey property? It's still sitting there. So I'm glad to see this moving along. I do worry about this issue of us having to match this. That's a concern, I think. So,
If I could ask.
And the other thing,
Yeah.
this is supposed to be a low impact. This is the word I've heard. I think isn't that the word I've heard, low impact? I don't know where that line's drawn You know, we heard about just walking trails, now I'm hearing a boat ramp. So, I mean, where's that line drawn as far as low impact goes?
Yeah, so there's as Pam noted, hopefully by next week, we're going to be starting a master plan process. And the way that would unfold, that would happen between now and June. And our kind of tentative timeline would be in February to have some type of conceptuals on a map so you could see actually what's being proposed. And some of those questions will be answered in the next few months as far as that goes. So there would be an opportunity for the public to respond to what's being proposed, probably have a couple of different options as to what we would do. And I think that's where some of those questions could be addressed as far as low impact. As far as the application itself, we did include water access, which would be a boat ramp and or kayak launch, some type of water access. We included trails, but there were no, outside of some infrastructure that you would need, a place to park, a restroom, those types of things. We didn't submit anything that would I think folks generally would consider as overdeveloped. And if we did veer from that path, I think National Parks would chime in on that because they have to approve all this.
Well, there is no other boat ramps between Salisbury and
Right.
Nanticoke,
Right.
right? Yeah, so
Correct.
there is probably a need for a boat ramp there,
I think so.
more so than just a kayak ramp.
Right, and I think the big thing that we're gonna have to work through with Army Corps and through our master plan process is can you do it safely there because of the channel and various issues that have been discussed. But I think water access, though, at some level needs to be strongly considered.
Yeah, talk about low impact, spending $1.6 million. It seems like for hiking trails or just, parking, I mean, how are you going to spend $1.6 million? I mean, even a pavilion doesn't seem like, so I mean, I'm just kind of, it seems like a lot of money for low impact, but maybe I'm not thinking, how expensive these projects are.
Yeah, I
So-
think the low impact is in terms of the recreational use.
Yeah.
Not necessarily
Unfortunately,
the
the dollars.
cost, yeah.
No,
So-
no,
So
but-
part of
yeah, but-
part of the project will be, have you been down there before?
Yeah.
That shoreline needs to be addressed
Okay.
in some way. So there's shoreline restoration, there'll be infrastructure, there'll be a trail system if there's structures like a boat ramp or things like that. That will be costly. But when you look at the whole of the project, it's 340 acres. It will be a very relatively small footprint as to what's going to be
development.
developed. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, 'cause
it'll be small.
I think hearing from the community, I mean, like the wooded section, I mean, some trails and that's about it, a place to park, obviously.
Right.
But, so I mean, not much in terms of what we have to spend money on, so.
Yeah, the biggest expenses are going to be your infrastructure costs associated with making the road usable for people to get back there. Stabilizing the shoreline, as Steve mentioned, that unfortunately is not a cheap prospect. And any type of boat ramp, with all the new regulations, we're finding that with trying to do the Riverside boat ramp, that just even rebuilding one we already have is not a cheap proposition. So 1.6 sounds like a lot, but when you're, basically starting from raw land, and it's gonna go quicker than we would probably like.
Yeah, and if I can add also, the 1.6 will also include the master plan, and the federal grant required an environmental assessment, which is going to look at both environmental, cultural impacts, some of the things that we heard today. So that would be going on.
Archaeological?
I'm sorry?
There'd be some archaeological?
Yeah, so they'll assess that, and then they'll make recommendation if we should do a phase one or what's necessary. So the initial assessment will include that. So that process of the environmental assessment and the master plan will kind of happen together. So as we learn the results, we can adjust the plan if we need to.
So with the shoreline stabilization, would that be riprap or bulkheading?
It would be with what the Army Corps and DNR basically allows us. I mean, it's really at that curve in the current bulkhead there is pretty much non-existent. And so you're losing land, but it's unfortunately at the narrowest part of where the Wicomico bends. And so if as they make the turn with the tugs, I have been told that, they have to kind of put on the engines hard, and it sends a lot back into that. And so that area itself, to maintain it so that it doesn't totally erode, is going to have something done. I don't know what it is. We will have to get the approvals for and do as they ask.
And the boat ramp, will that require a paved parking lot?
It will require a parking lot, yes.
And does any of this have to be approved by the Critical Areas Commission?
Yes.
So this is all pending on approval?
Yes. Yeah, and through the process, so Maryland Historical Trust was mentioned earlier with public comments. We've already interfaced with them. They're part of the review process with the grant. And as the master plan develops, they'll be fully engaged with this process and offer comments and recommendations. So we've engaged all those agencies. We'll continue to do that, including the council and the public. And I think the end goal, like you said, that's been sitting here for 25 years, the thing I'm excited about is public access. When this is all said and done, this will be a year's process, but when we get done, I think the public will have access, which is the goal.
There's been talk of selling the West Side Park property, so there won't be any ball fields built there. Is there any, with this farmland being cleared further part off the river, chance of any ball fields being built on this property, or?
We've not discussed that, and I would say no. I mean, that would not fit with the objectives that we outlined in this project. Yeah, that would not. That would overdevelop it, and that's not what we're looking to do.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I was, good, Mark.
Sorry, in terms of the planning process, will there be a chance for people to give input at the beginning? You see, last from now until next June, let's say. People to kind of give their ideas. You work on the master plan, then people comment upon the final master plan, and then we approve, or how is that going to work?
I think because we've gone through a process with that work group last year that gave us those three main objectives, that is why we got this grant. I think our intention is to start the master planning process, give the public something to look at, because it could be a dartboard type thing that may not line up with the grant and why we've received this grant. So I think our intention is to, like I said, by February, hopefully, to have some conceptuals, maybe some options, receive public feedback and input in addition to all the different agencies that we have to interact with, and then adjust the plan as needed.
And then does the final plan get approved by us, or how does the final approval work?
I guess that would be an executive question. I don't know the answer as far as that goes.
I have heard from folks, more than just the people in this room, that
Right.
they would like more public input into what's happening. So I would encourage you to open this up as much as possible to
Sure.
the public and hear their ideas.
Sure.
I mean, everyone seems fairly, pleased with a lot of these low-impact ideas and things like that.
Yeah.
But there's a worry that there hasn't been enough public comment or public input. This has been kind of a flashpoint,
Okay.
as you know. So
Yeah.
I think it'd be easier to get more public in, to involve the public as much as possible at the beginning. It would make it smoother, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to look at the application mainly because I was interested in trying to get an idea of where the interest came from, and how the goals were set as far as what was needed, and, et cetera, and how it followed suit. The only thing that I saw really was that a work group was appointed of 12 people, about 9 of them consistently participated in the polls. And I didn't think that was that representative of the entire county. I was actually, and I'm being frank with you, I was very surprised. I thought there was going to be some type of major, documentation that said, all the members of the county want this, so many members in the community are looking for this. But the only thing I saw through this whole process is there were 12 people appointed as a work group and said, go tell us why we want this, and then bring it back. And that was it. Part of the justification in the description or the application talked about how there were several opportunities for public hearings, et cetera, et cetera. But I could not find this project in the capital improvement program as this was stated here. I found it in the budget under a capital item, but I could not find any CIPs going back to 2014 that had Pirates Wharf listed. So there wasn't any opportunity for the public to be involved in Pirates Wharf because there wasn't any public hearing for Pirates Wharf.
Well,
Yes.
can I comment on that?
Sure,
So two things. I hear, excuse me, I hear what you're saying as far as the desire for more public input. I think those 12 individuals that were appointed represented many other folks. So there were folks from the Natural Resource Commission that were part of that, people that are involved with critical areas from the university. So I think
Select group.
it was representative group, so that is one thing, but I think it represented a bigger segment, certainly not the entire county. But the other is our land preservation plan, which is that 5-year
I understand.
plan. And Pirates Wharf was mentioned in that, and we did do countywide.
But it was very vague. It was,
Yeah.
if anything, it was your 7th listed item as far as priorities, your 7th listed item. And it was very vague. It said nothing more than the fact that there would be a Pirates Wharf consideration for the development. But there was nothing that extrapolated as far as, you know, exactly how far you're going to go or what the cost might be.
Sure.
Nothing that I thought that the public could look at that and go, oh, that's a commitment or that's not a commitment.
Yeah,
It's just a general term.
yeah.
But anyway,
Sure.
I was concerned by that. I say that, because I understand what Joe's saying. Is, it's always good to have another place for, if they want to put a boat out, or if you want to fish or something like that, if the community wants to meet. Just, curious as to, the need for it based on what the costs might be, even, overlooking the fact that, everybody waves grants in your face, and that's very appealing, but there's still going to be a commitment on the part of the local community. I also couldn't find, and maybe it's my shortcoming, I couldn't find any reference in the budget whatsoever on these leases that, I know that, you showed that there was a copy of the check. I believe there's a copy of the check that was $11,498 in here. But I didn't see anything in the budget under Recreation and Parks where it showed that there was any income from any leases. Matter of fact, it said for 2018, 2019, it was zero.
Yeah, go ahead, Pam.
These have been accounted for in the operating budget, not in any kind of project or standalone. So these monies have been coming in, and there's a schedule in your packet that gives account numbers of where these funds have been deposited.
Right.
We, with the hunting rights going away, we had stopped that process a year or so ago, so we did not put that in the budget. With the house going away, we hadn't been putting that one in the budget. The farm lease has been, and the additional documentation that is behind, Munis unfortunately only shows you the current year budget. Because we were planning changes, we did not budget for additional income associated with those, but it shows that that income has been collected. And I went back to 2008 since that was the first year of Munis, and that was the year that we could then show that all of those monies have gone through Munis, have gone through the accounting system that has been audited.
I was just looking at the line item in this most recent budget.
And we did not budget it in 2019 for the purposes of the fact that there's no house anymore to
But the
lease.
prior year, it was listed as zero for the prior year as well.
I can't
Hey,
remember.
I'm not worried about it. I thought that was just an inconsistency. I thought I'd just bring it to your attention.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, and to go off of what John was saying, people have contacted me about this, since it's been in the news, seemed pretty pleased with the documents and the plans and things like that. But I think there was a concern, somebody said, oh, this was done behind closed doors. And nobody, people who were very interested in this didn't know that it was happening. So again, I think that, getting community buy-in, I think people seem generally happy with the trails and things like that. And so, the more you can get community buy-in, the more that at the end of the plan will be less contentious and things like that. So,
Yeah.
so that would be, to go off what John was saying. I think a lot of people were surprised that there was a working group and things like that. That people who are very actively following this, and there's a very committed group that's actively following this, didn't seem to know about any of this.
Yeah.
So that was their concern.
Okay.
So.
Fair enough.
Are you sure you're correct on the fact that if we couldn't come up with a matching grant, in other words, if you told the federal government, hey, we can only match, 600,000 or something like that, that they wouldn't do that instead of the 800, or?
We could request a reduction, but that could be not seen favorably
To who?
to DNR, who advocated on our behalf to get the grant.
How did they come up with the 800,000? What drove them to come up with that figure, I wonder?
We started at a lower figure, to be honest with you, but more funding became available, and through Program Open Space, we felt like we could dedicate more towards Program Open Space to increase that number. So the 820, in combination with the farm lease and hunting lease, all that money that was saved up, and the grants that we feel like that we're going to get.
So you told them how much you had so they could match that?
Correct. We gave a number that we felt comfortably that we could match without having to go to the county to say we need a lot of extra money.
But
Yeah.
if they don't match you, they don't let you convert that, the county's gonna have to fork it out.
Well,
If the state grants didn't come through, then the county would need to look at other alternatives to funding. But like I said, this whole process through the federal grant went through DNR. DNR oversees Program Open Space. I don't see any scenario where it would not be approved.
Were we informed of this application process before you got notification of this grant?
I don't believe in a formal way as far as the application. I don't believe so.
It would be nice so we could start preparing or at least thinking about this.
Okay.
So when do you need our approval?
Well, what's the next step, I guess? Where is it now, and where is it gonna go?
the next step would be is that we're asking for this to be put on a legislative session to have the fiscal year 19 budget amendment to allow us to transfer the $254,000 out of the Rec and Parks fund balance that has been saved up in the fund balance based on the documentation we have presented, to move it to the project that has already been set up in the $100,000. And then when we get a Program Open Space notification, then we would come back and ask for another amendment to the fiscal. And that one would then require, all it would require is an adjustment of the CIP because there would be no operating budget impact associated with that.
I don't even know.
So how long do you have to match the grant?
How long?
Yeah.
We've presented this plan as part of the application process, so they understand like POS maybe in next year's fiscal budget if we needed to tap into it again. So we have through the duration of the project to match it. So we don't have to, we have to commit to match it, but you don't have to necessarily have the money in hand because they understand state funding is part of the
So
equation.
that would be 4 years.
Yes, we have a 4-year window, yes.
In your master plan, can you also include a basic maintenance plan for the 5 years after this project's completed, so we'll know about what it's gonna cost to maintain this property?
Yes.
You know, depending on how it's developed,
Yes, and we'll also include,
how that's gonna be paid for.
Sure.
So, okay.
So you say that when you come back, there will be an actual plan as to what's going to be there?
No, so we'll need to consult with the executive's office on what we've heard today. But what we're suggesting is, at the minimum, that we would come back sometime in February and present conceptuals. So this would not be a final plan. It would be conceptuals that the public could react to, that they could see what's being proposed where, and then get input. And if more than that needs to happen, we'll consult with the executive's office. And
So again, what we're asking for is this to be moved to a regular legislative session for a budget amendment and to allow the county executive to sign the grant.
I think we'd want to see a plan first. I mean, that's just my opinion. There's 7 people here.
yeah, and the grant is going to pay for the plan. So
I thought we already had money for the
I'm
plan.
not talking about, I'm
Oh,
talking
right.
about concept, period. I mean, we're not asking for much.
Well, but that is, the concept is unfortunately the 3 things that we've laid out. That is the concept, where it goes, how it goes, is it a 2-mile trail, a 10-mile trail? That kind of stuff is going to come through the master plan, which if we currently have $100,000 in our budget. But if we start spending those funds without the grant acceptance, then they're not eligible they may not be eligible then to match the federal money.
What concerns me and many citizens is that a lot of these projects are brought to us with a time limit. We're put under pressure, so let's hurry up and rush to accept this. And it happens
Yeah, we hear
often.
that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be in favor of, bringing the grant forward.
Yeah, I'm not against
Yeah,
it.
I mean, this is, we're kind of picking a little bit here, but that's our job. I mean, this is a very positive thing we're moving
Right.
forward on. Again, we are hearing from people that were kind of surprised by it, but it would be good, I do think we should move forward, and I understand what you're saying about using the money in terms of the match and stuff like that, but, we will have further chances, we're gonna take further bites at this apple. I mean, this
Yes.
isn't the only thing that we have to approve. We have to then approve more budget things down the road.
Correct.
Is that correct? So,
Correct.
Well, we keep hearing about the simplicity of it and the low impact of it, but it seems like it's.
Well, yeah, I mean, it started as a reference of $350,000 with the county portion of 35 in your land preservation document. And my perception of reading that was the total cost. That wasn't like just A&E or anything like that. That was the total cost, 350, and the county's portion was 35. And where is it now, though? I mean, is it at 1.6, or is it still 820, or what is it?
It'd be 1.6, so the federal piece would be 820. The 350 you reference is the program open space portion of that, which would be used to match the 820.
Yeah, and I think it's very unclear. You're asking us to commit to a huge amount of money up front, and we're not even sure how far this is going to go, or what the true costs are going to be to the citizens of Wicomico County.
The intention is that with this plan, this would be that the $100,000 that the county committed through PAYGO this year would be the only funds that we would be asking for from PAYGO. The $254,000 currently sits in our fund balance and is required to be used on the property at Pirates Wharf per program open space guidelines. So we're just asking for those funds to be committed and moved to this project so they can follow program open space guidelines. So our intention is that 354, but the 100 is the only commitment from the county fund or the county PAYGO, the county general fund. That $100,000 that has already been committed, that was already put there in fiscal 19, that's the only funds that we anticipate needing, because we believe between program open space and these waterway improvement grants, we can accomplish the remainder of the project match.
Well, I guess, go back, I hate to keep repeating this word, the simplicity of the project, the low impact. I mean, are we talking, nice bathrooms with heat and air conditioning, or are we talking porta potties? Are we talking a paved parking lot, or are we talking a parking lot with stone? Are we talking walking trails that are paved or stoned? Or are we talking walking trails where they have to wear boots if it rains? I mean, this is some of the things, I guess, that we need answers to.
And that's what the planning process would
You know.
allow us to do. But
You need
without
$800,000
the,
to do the planning process?
Pardon me?
You need
No.
the total, what do you need to do the planning process?
The planning process is there's a master planning process that's going to answer all of those questions as to what you can put where, and it will include budget estimates and probably some type of phasing, that if you wanted to go beyond this, that here's things that you could consider in the future. But I think the goal would be to accomplish the objectives that we've laid out, which again is public water access, some type of low impact recreation, which we interpret as hiking, bird watching, those types of activities, and trying to keep the place as natural as possible. So those details, I hear your question, and I'd like to know the answers to those things. We don't know the answers to those yet, but that's why we're going to go through that process and come back to you and present those ideas and adjust.
So was a request for proposal on bidding or anything done to come up with figures to meet this 1.64?
A
How
request
did you come up with those figures?
with the 1.6.
Right.
We worked with Department of Natural Resources that administered this federal grant. And we felt as the process started, so we had initially applied for $400,000 of federal money.
Yeah.
As the process went along, they came to me, they actually had awarded 3 projects. And we were one of those three. One of those three ended up dropping off for some unknown reason. So she kind of called me in a panic over the summer and said, hey, we've got additional money, can you match it? So we kind of recalibrated a little bit with Program Open Space and funding that is available without having to come back to the county to say, hey, we need more money. And the plan we've presented to you is a way that we're leveraging the $100,000 that we got into 1.6 without having to ask the county for any additional money. So that 1.6 is the number we felt like we could match without having to come back to the county.
So do you know if there are contractors that will meet these guidelines, these estimates?
No, this project's not been bid out. There's nothing to bid at this point. It's concepts at this point, but we're hoping over the next 6 months, by June, we'll have an environmental assessment done and a master plan hopefully done. And at that point, then you start looking at permitting and bidding and all those fun things. So, and then we'll have to prioritize. If the project's more than 1.6, we'll prioritize and maybe phase it for future program open space or however we.
So we're hoping the contracts will be within range.
I think honestly with what we've presented with 1.6, we can accomplish at some level the things that we've.
Put Disney World there.
Yeah. I think
regardless of the details being worked out, I haven't heard a single citizen against this project. I think that residents would like to see an amenity down in that end of the county. So I think that's the main thing that we should focus on, is trying to get this ball rolling and let the details get sorted out by the professionals.
That's a good point. And I mean, that was my first concern when we started was, I'm not familiar with a huge demand for it. I understand, as Joe said, it'd be nice to have this. I'm not sure about the huge demand. And you always have to balance, I think, what the costs are with what the needs are. And I haven't heard a lot of people saying, hey, we have to have a park at Pirates Wharf. That could be my problem. I may not be getting out enough.
John, I'll make sure to give him your phone.
I know. Yeah.
I've definitely been hearing from people about it. I mean, yeah. So.
Okay.
Just want to make sure we can afford it.
Understood.
And again.
Or we're spending our money properly.
Correct. And again, what we attempted to do was to craft this in such a way that the $100,000 that was already committed is the funds that are coming from the general fund. And at this point in time, we would not be asking for any other general fund monies.
And if you do, we would have to, so ultimately the decision would be in our hand about that general fund.
Correct. So again, the next step we're asking for is in a legislative session to budget amendment with the 254 and the authority to sign the grant.
So we're being committed to $800,000
Correct.
without having a plan.
Without the $800,000, you're not going to have a plan.
Wayne?
Can I put this into perspective? As Joe said, we've had this property for 25 years. The shoreline is eroding every year. We're losing the shoreline. We have an opportunity here to get $1.5 million in federal and state funding to develop that park. We're asking you, do you want to take advantage of that opportunity or not? If you do, let's take advantage of it. If you don't, we'll just move on. It's really where we are.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, well, we'll look to see what you bring back to the council.
Okay.
So we can see what we can put on the agenda.
Okay.
All right?
Very good.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Where are we, gentlemen?
Thank you,
Should
Pam.
look at Joe on that one. Thank you again, guys.
Have you got what you need? All right, entertain a motion to adjourn from the open work session, and reconvene the legislative session.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The next item on the agenda is resolution number 117-2018, the bond award resolution. Entertain a motion from council to approve resolution number 117-2018.
So moved.
Second? Second.
Second.
Okay,
Sorry.
you have the floor.
Okay, I'll wait. let me just preview with you where we are with regard to the sale while we wait for our folks to come in. As you know, we went to the market to sell $10.5 million in bonds. We had 7 bidders. That's a fairly broad market. Citigroup Global, we're proposing to award the bid to. The true interest cost being offered is 3.019360%. They're paying $585,000 in premium that we'll immediately use for the transaction costs and part of the projects that we have proposed. So we're borrowing $9,915,000. Just to give you some perspective on the interest rate, last year, for an issue of about the same size, our true interest cost was 2.44%. The Fed discount rate at the time was 1.75%. The Fed discount rate today is 2.75%. So one would have expected that we might be in a range of 3.5% on this borrowing cost this year. So in essence, the county, because of its credit rating and its performance, has really beat the market, if you will, in terms of the spread on interest rates. So we're very pleased with the interest rate, and as soon as my folks get here, we can move to the ministerial portions of what we have to do here today.
Okay.
Any questions on any of that?
What did you say we were borrowing?
We're actually going to borrow, Larry, $9,915,000. We're obtaining what's called a premium of $585,000. So we'll use premium to pay the transaction costs and to pay for some of the projects that are included in this borrowing. True interest cost, 3.019360%. That's about 0.5% above last year, but like I said, the Fed discount rate moved 1% over last year. So
it's about 9.5 instead of 10.5.
So in essence, we beat the market, if you will. And we'll be borrowing less money than we had anticipated to borrow. So our P&I is going to be lower than we had anticipated. I think when we did the budget, I think I asked Dawn to put in an assumed interest rate of 3.25%. So we're on the full 10.5. So we're going to be a little bit better in terms of our P&I moving forward.
I think your people are here.
Come on forward.
Come on up.
I think you've covered it.
That's what it sounds like.
Good afternoon. For those of you not aware, Joe Mason with Davenport. Colleague Jennifer Dirksen behind me.
How are you?
Do we have the documents prepared that we need? Has Laura received from Lindsay what we need? Great, okay.
Yes, and we want the one,
Yeah, so Lindsay Rader with Funkin Bolton has sent Laura the resolution that you all have to approve that has all the detail, all the numbers in it. Okay, great, thank you.
Joe, how's it been? How you been?
good, busy.
Good. I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Tax reform changed the market a little bit.
Right.
They did away with advance refund rates, so that's about 25% of the market. But the economy's also doing better, and people are doing more stuff, so it kind of cancels itself out. Overall volume in the municipal market is down this year, which is part of the reason why your rates are rising in that market, less so than they are in sort of the treasury and Fed discount rate and all of that. So there's a lot of demand chasing a limited supply of paper, so.
Yeah. I think just like everybody else, I was surprised that they're nudging the interest rates forward.
So Sam Ketterman has retired?
Sam Ketterman has retired last September. He So, part of the Dodd-Frank legislation created a new regulatory framework that previously didn't exist for the municipal advisory business. Davenport's always been a regulated entity. There are a lot of smaller independent advisors out there that suddenly had to go out and take an exam, as did we. It's called the Series 50 exam, and that was sort of the impetus for Sam finally. He'd been talking about it for 2 or 3 years. He's like, I'm not cracking the book on that test. That's going to be my endpoint, so.
Well, he's been a good rep for all these years.
He certainly has.
Mrs. Hurley, will an amendment be necessary to update it to the actual figures?
No, what you're looking at is a red line version from what is in the brief book. So the red line actually will show the changes, so the numbers have already been updated. And then the black line would be the final version that you're adopting today.
Okay. Anything else that needs to be reviewed on your part?
Did he go over the interest rates and?
Yeah, I went over the business terms law.
Any other questions from council? Everybody have enough time to review it all? Entertain a motion to approve Resolution 117, 2018.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried, resolution passes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you.
All right, Joe. Excuse me? Yes. Yes, we are.
Joe's already gone.
Ask Joe. Ask Joe. You need a motion?
Entertain a motion to adjourn from the legislative session.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Means adjourned.